In an aggressive opening statement during a House Oversight Committee hearing, Katie Porter, a Democratic California representative, criticized Republican attacks on the Internal Revenue Service and proposed a strategy she called death by a thousand cuts. Must watch. Happen Just Now. Enjoy hearing your thoughts. Please leave comments. Thanks.
For too many years, Washington politicians have worked to gut the Internal Revenue Service, and they found creative ways to cut the IRS time and time again. How do they do that? Phase one, they start by attacking its credibility. Look, I know that the agency that collects our taxes isn't easy to love. Believe me, opportunistic politicians know that too. So they go on TV and they give the IRS a verbal slash, falsely suggesting to the American people that the IRS is spying on us, targeting us for our political beliefs, or going after us to pay more money than we owe. What a bunch of BS. But even though those claims lack any evidence, we might be inclined to believe negative things about an agency that collects taxes. Look, even the Bible isn't that kind to tax collectors.
Republicans have passed their first bill. In their very first legislative act last night, the new GOP majority passed a measure to repeal $80 billion in Internal Revenue Service funding. The Family and Small Business Taxpayer Protection Act passed on a straight party line vote, 221 to 210. Among the critics was Virginia 3rd District Democrat Bobby Scott, who said the bill would protect wealthy tax cheats and add $114 billion to the deficit. But supporters like Virginia 2nd District Republican Jen Kiggins said the bill will protect middle-class families from unwarranted IRS audits.
And this is the bill that was a campaign promise from Republicans. It gets rid of that $80 billion to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. Now, we did keep a small amount of funding in there to improve some customer service processing and technology upgrades for the IRS. But overall, Republicans are here to reduce the size of the federal government, to get the government out of your lives.
These politicians easily succeed in creating and spreading hostility, making it even easier to slash the IRS again. Cue phase two, full-on partisan investigations and attacks on the hardworking employees of the IRS. Look no further than the last time the committee Republicans went hard after the IRS. Under the Obama administration, Republicans falsely claimed the IRS was unfairly targeting conservative organizations more than progressive organizations applying for tax-exempt status. The IRS spent $20 million and produced 1 million pages of documents in response. Ultimately, Republicans didn't prove anything. They instead used it to justify diverting resources from IRS customer service, IT, and enforcement. But that's what opportunistic politicians wanted, to turn people against the IRS.
Welcome back to The Lead. Another national lead, distrust of big government writ large and of the Internal Revenue Service more specifically. Well, those are cornerstones of the Tea Party ethos. Now it looks as though the IRS went and proved their point for them. And the president, well, he says he did not know the IRS was singling out conservative groups until the news broke.
I first learned about it from the same news reports that I think most people learned about this. If you've got the IRS operating in anything less than a neutral and nonpartisan way, then that is outrageous. But I've got no patience with it. I will not tolerate it, and we will make sure that we find out exactly what happened on this.
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney today said that a Treasury Department Inspector General did notify the White House counsel's office that it was finishing its report in these practices, but Carney says the counsel's office did not tell the president about it before it hit the press last Friday. The report is coming out this week, the Inspector General report, and it has outrageous conclusions about how organizations seeking tax-exempt status were handled. It shows that not only did Tea Party groups get more scrutiny, but so did a host of other conservative groups that dared to criticize government spending and discuss the national debt. This comes after Lois Lerner, the IRS director for tax-exempt groups, admitted that agents flagged certain applications for review based on keywords like Tea Party and Patriot. pretty much anybody who was likely to hold up a poster of President Obama looking like the Joker at one point or another. Politically motivated audits are so obviously wrong, they've even been comedy fodder for the president. Recall when he visited Arizona State University in 2009, and that university would not give him an honorary degree because he was so new.
President Crow and the Board of Regents will soon learn about being audited by the IRS.
After that, of course, came the birth of the Tea Party in 2010. Now, some of these conservative groups suspected they were being treated differently by the IRS, but Douglas Shulman, the IRS commissioner, who was appointed by President George W. Bush and retired in November, he assured Congress that was not the case.
An organization. There's absolutely no targeting. This is the kind of back and forth that happens when people apply for 501c4 status.
To divert resources so the agency can't do its job, and then to take one last slash. That brings us to phase 3, budget cuts. When politicians tell us that our tax collector is after us, no one wants to fund the collector. And that's exactly what's happened. Opportunistic politicians have succeeded in cutting IRS staffing 20% lower than it was in 2010, even though the country has grown by 7% since then. The agency has been so battered that we'll need 52,000 new IRS employees just to meet the agency's needs. That's how bad it's gotten, folks, year after year of politicians taking slashes at the IRS. Opportunistic politicians haven't succeeded in totally killing the IRS by 1,000 cuts, but the cuts have gotten deep and the agency is badly wounded. Who suffers from all this? We do. We all suffer.
And the IRS is deteriorating after 8 years of government budget cuts. Now, that's according to a ProPublica article, how the IRS was gutted. The lack of funding reportedly left the agency understaffed and operating with outdated equipment. The article says the agency's decline has benefited corporations and enabled the wealthy to more easily evade taxes. Paul Keel joins me now. He is a consumer finance reporter at ProPublica, and he co-authored the story. Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
Okay.
You call the IRS the agency that has no friends, and let's face it, the tax man has never been a lovable character. But when did the IRS start to face such a concerted government effort towards defunding?
Well, it happened, 2010, Obamacare gets passed, and there's this wave election in the midterms, and Republicans take control of the House. And that's really when it starts. There's a lot of pressure all over the government to slim down, to make the government smaller. And it really comes to a head in 2013. They're able to cut the budget. They're upset about Obamacare. And I think what people don't realize is that the IRS was a big part of implementing that law. And so going after the IRS budget was, in a way, going after Obamacare. And then this sort of scandal explodes in 2013 involving Lois Lerner and going after right-leaning nonprofits, conservative nonprofits, and that becomes sort of the reason behind these cuts. Mm-hmm. And kind of the key thing is no one was ever saying, we think the IRS should be conducting fewer audits. We think the IRS should be, collecting fewer tax debts. It was always these other issues, but the effect of the budget cuts over this time has been pretty sizable.
So the agency was first vilified, and then the budget cuts began. What has been the effect to the agency of these cuts?
So they've lost a third of their enforcement staff. We're talking about thousands of agents that have left because people have been retiring and they're not replacing them. And so the audit rate is down 40%, over 40%. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands, I think over 600,000 fewer audits they're doing now compared to 2010.
And you make the very important point that the people who are benefiting from these fewer audits are the wealthy and corporations, and the poor are facing increased scrutiny. Is that right?
Right. So, I think the way to think about it is It's hard to audit wealthy people. It's hard to audit businesses. You need well-trained people to do that. So when those people are leaving, there's not really a way to replace them. Whereas a lot of these audits of lower-income people are really automated, and so it's through computers, a lot of it, and so that has not fallen off as much as the audits of the wealthy.
And you say especially any lower-income people who take any sort of federal assistance.
Right. There's one of our biggest anti-poverty programs is run through the IRS, the Earned Income Tax Credit. People don't know that, but it's like the size of food stamps, basically, in terms of our program. It's a big deal to people. They get the money. It's people who are working and have children, and it boosts millions of children out of poverty every year. But there's been research that shows there's a lot of those credits go out that are incorrect or improper, and so there's a very high audit rate on those people. But when people get caught up in that, because the IRS is so understaffed, this process can drag on. Even if you are right to claim the credit, it can take a year to finally get the refund that you've been depending on.
So there's something sort of just seems so unfair about that the poorest among us are facing the most scrutiny when the result is the fewest number of tax dollars, and the wealthiest seem to be getting away with so much.
When we need help with our taxes and no one is available at the IRS to pick up the phone, blame a politician who slashed the IRS budget. When we want the IRS to make tax filing easier or work harder to make our information more secure, but the IRS can't invest in technology with adequate cybersecurity, blame a politician who slashed the IRS. When we pay our fair share of taxes and just want the IRS to make sure billionaires do the same, but they don't have the staff or the resources to do it, blame a politician who slashed the IRS. Our current House Republican majority has too many of these politicians who love to slash government institutions to their breaking points. As we sit in yet another Republican-led hearing to attack the IRS instead of making it work better, other Republicans are off slashing our entire Congress at the same time. They've stopped Congress from doing its work because they haven't been able to elect a Speaker of the House, so we can't pass any legislation. The most opportunistic Republicans have spent so long attacking our government that now Republicans don't even trust each other. But that's what the opportunists wanted: a weak Congress, a weak IRS. It's what they call smart government. But in reality, it's a federal government that can't serve its people. Right now, the opportunists are creating that reality: a bipartisan coalition of reasonable members of Congress can stop them. Today, everything that we do and say matters. Before my colleagues whack the IRS, consider that your whack might be one of the thousands of cuts over time that weakens our government and hurts the American people. Instead, we should all use today to determine what the IRS needs to serve the American people and how Congress can be an effective partner. That is, if Republicans ever elect a speaker so we can legislate.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Happen Just Now for more content about accountability of all public officials and policies and procedures.